everyone. Welcome to In the Cordon, the place where every cricketer wants to be. I'm your host, Callum Dunk, and thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Today, we're going to be talking about the Australian and West Indies ODI series, and joining me to do that is regular panelist Lewis Dade. Louis, how are you, mate?
Going very well, thank you, Callum. Looking forward to talking about two very interesting and different series with all the cricket going on around the world at the moment.
Absolutely. We do have a India and England second test match review, which we will post in a separate video. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. But Louis, before we get started, we want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors who's just extended with us, and that's Ray White Henley Beach. So for all of your real estate needs, whether you're looking to purchase a property, whether you're looking to sell a property, or whether you're looking to get your property managed, make sure you head over to Anthony and the team at Ray White Henley Beach to get all your needs covered. So, Lewis, Australia won the series against the West Indies 3-0, and it was a pretty lackluster series, if we're being perfectly honest. But I suppose the most positive thing to come out of the series is Australia were able to blood four new players, but they were also able to give some players in the likes of Matt Shaw and Aaron Hardy their first ODI games in Australia. But if we're looking at the people who made their debut, Xavier Bartlett, absolutely exceptional. We'll talk about him in a bit more detail. Jake Fraser-McGurk lighting it up in Canberra. Will Sutherland made his debut as well, and Lance Morris, who we've all been anticipating to make his debut. We've heard about his raw pace, and we're finally able to see it in action in the green and gold for the first time. But Louis, let's talk about Xavier Bartlett. 4 for 17 on debut at the MCG, the second best figures on debut by an Australian ODI bowler, and then rested, I suppose, for the second game, but came back in that third match to take 4 for 21 and ended up being player of the series. How did you assess Bartlett's performance in his first two games?
Yeah, look, I think certainly it was an interesting one, right? Because if you look at his list A stats, it's nothing overwhelmingly special. Obviously, this was off the back of a good big bash, and also a guy that's been relatively good in his performances for Queensland in the Sheffield Shield. I thought he was very good. The only interesting one from a one day perspective is Bartlett was very good in the sense that he took what you would call almost test match wickets. He was pitching the ball up, swinging it around. And I'm not necessarily sure if this series tells us what he'll be like in a 300 versus 300 kind of, traditional one day game now against an India or England or someone like that. Broadly speaking, he very much impressed. I actually think the test selectors will be as interested by what they saw as the one day selectors are. But no, you really can't fault a guy who's coming in and averaging now 4 with the ball in his 2 games, and he showed the ability to swing it, which we saw in the Big Bash. He's tall, he gets good bounce. He's not necessarily lightning quick, but I suggest he bowls a heavy ball. So there's plenty to like there in his first outing in Australian colours.
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt that he's seriously impressed in his first two games, and he could be a smoky to go onto that New Zealand Test tour with what's happened to Lance Morris. He suffered a side strain, so let's talk about Lance Morris. He did exactly set the world on fire in his first game, but was able to take 2 wickets in Canberra yesterday, and there was certainly a lot to like in terms of his pace and um, just looking at him, I think he can bowl even quicker than what he's showing right now. Brett Lee was talking on commentary about him, potentially being able to run in a little bit quicker and really push that 150 mark. We saw him consistently in the 140s, but what did you make of his performances?
I think the interesting thing with Morris, I think as someone that's been around the Test squad for a while without playing, I potentially think the players in the media have slightly overblown how fast he is from a speed gun perspective. He's quick. There's no doubt about it. He's sharp. He isn't Brett Lee. He isn't Sean Tate. He's not in that caliber. He's kind of half a notch below. I think Brett Lee was bang on that he could be bowling quicker. I think this is a generational thing now with quick bowlers where they're trying to find actions that allow you to bowl fairly quick over a long period of time, as opposed to these guys that can bowl 155 but are breaking down all the time. At the end of the day, it was plenty promising. It is a shame he's out with that side strain now, and young fast bowlers, this is an issue we see. Some will say that it could be because he actually hasn't played enough cricket over the last period of time. But again, there's enough to see that he's quick. Is he absolutely expressed? No, but I certainly think there's a future there.
Yeah, and I suppose the one that's up there with Xavier Bartlett as seriously impressive to watch and certainly has a spark about him, and that's Jake Fraser-McGurk. He's moved to South Australia this season, got a 29 ball 100 in the 50 over competition that we have here in Australia, and certainly been very impressive in the Big Bash for the Melbourne Renegades. I've haven't seen a player debut for Australia for quite some time that's had just such an awe, a gravitas, a swagger, I suppose. And I'm pretty bullish on Jake Fraser-McGurk based on what I've seen in, you know, the 23 balls that he's faced in international cricket, and 41 off 18 yesterday in Canberra was certainly pretty impressive. And in his first game, he wasn't there to muck around. He got on with it. So there's certainly a lot to like about him, and he's only 21 years of age. So, the sky's the limit. What can Jake Fraser-McGurk be in his career, and how long until he's potentially playing all three formats for Australia?
The two comparisons I've seen out there are Warner and Maxwell, which come as no surprise when you look at the way the guy plays. I don't actually think Warner is the right comparison here. I think if you look at the way he bats, it gives it. I get a lot more Glenn Maxwell coming off of kind of the way he uses his hands. He's definitely kind of a fast twitch kind of stroke player, and also a guy that's really trying to free his own swinging arc in either direction. I think the battle Cricket Australia is going to have, the battle that he's going to have now, is that if you take Glenn Maxwell as the prototype, for as good as he's been in white ball cricket for Australia, I have no doubt that one day Cricket Australia will put their hand up and say, we have missed out on a three format player here, and some of that's the way they handled Glenn Maxwell. It's going to be really hard to keep him developing in all three formats, finding the time to play Shield cricket for South Australia so he can become a look for the long form of the game. At the same point in time, the biggest giveaway for me is that you hear all the former players are talking him up as someone that's going to play three formats for Australia, and for me, that's a given sign. This is the way they spoke about a young Steve Smith. This is the way they spoke about a young Michael Clarke. This is the way they spoke about a young Ricky Ponting. And that, to me, is the biggest giveaway of anything. If all the former players think this guy's up to it, he's up to it. Cricket Australia are going to have a hell of a job figuring out how they'll develop him as a three format player, given the way the modern cricket schedule works.
Yeah, and we've seen him go over and dominate Big Bash, but we've also seen him go to Dubai to play for the Dubai Capitals in the IL T20. So, he is a player that is certainly going to attract, those franchise deals. He put his name into the IPL, and there's no doubt in my mind that he'll get signed as a replacement player at some point in the tournament and get signed up very cheaply as well to add to it. But just his hand speed, the bat speed that he comes through, the way that he's able to hit so crisply through the leg side is just so enticing to watch. We've seen what he's done in the Big Bash with some of his big hits, particularly at Marvel, which is quite a small ground in the scheme of things. But, Monica yesterday is a pretty big ground, so he's able to clear the boundary, and I would love to see him play Test cricket, but I still think that's probably 2 years away. Realistically, I think Australia would be pretty keen to try and get him around the white ball squads as much as possible. Whether he makes the World Cup is a different story, but I guess time will tell with those ones. The other debutant for Australia was Will Sutherland, and I thought he looked pretty solid with both bat and ball. I think he will be a long-term sort of project for Cricket Australia, but he's certainly been able to improve the way that he bowls his slow balls. We've seen him bowl at the death for the Melbourne Renegades. So I don't think he's going to get a lot of opportunities in the next 2 to 3 years, but I think once, those players of Cummins, Hazelwood and Stark retire, he's certainly going to be in, squad calculations. What did you make of Sutherland?
Yeah, look, he bowls a heavy ball. He's one of those guys whose angle and seam is slanting into the right hander, but his best ball is that almost wobble seam ball that angles in and then floats away. At this point of his career, I'm not actually sure, how much of that is under his control and how much of it is just he hits the deck and puts the ball in good areas. The big thing for Sutherland is he's sharp, but he's not out and out quick. He can do a little bit with the ball, but he's neither an out and out swing or seam bowler. Whether he ends up, and he obviously can bat, whether he ends up being someone that we try to groom into a number 7 or a number 6 that also, gives you really good overs, or whether he kind of fits more into like a John Hastings mold as a cricketer. I think he's a good player. I wouldn't be as confident that he's going to be a long-term 3 format player for Australia, but there's a lot to like there as far as fundamentals are concerned.
Yeah, he certainly can bat. I remember 5 years ago, I was doing some work for Cricket Australia in Saka in the under 19 tournament space, and he was captain of Victoria, and he was batting four, and um, even without bowling in that tournament because he was injured, he was still able to have a really fantastic tournament with the bat. And I know that was 5 years ago, but if he's got the capabilities to bat, four to six in the lineup, in Australia in the future, he could certainly look to push to that number seven, number six sort of spot, bowl, kind of in a James Faulkner type role. Jimmy Faulkner hasn't been around for a while, and he's certainly someone that I think we've missed in limited overs cricket for Australia. But Louis, I think it's time that we talk about the West Indies. Unfortunately, not many fantastic performances in this 3-game series, but the one player who certainly stood out for me was Carty. Made a half century, or high 80, I should say, against England in the third one-day international sort of late December sort of time. But he certainly looked really good in Melbourne until he was absolutely barbecued by Hayden Walsh Jr. Missed out on a maiden ODI century. But yeah, he's certainly someone that looked really good in this series and would give the West Indian fans a lot of hope, because their one-day cricket has certainly been really disappointing, or their limited overs cricket, more in fact, has been really disappointing over the last 2 years. And Darren Sammy's trying to come in and find a squad that's going to work. But what did you make of the West Indies in this series, and were there any particular players that stood out to you?
Yeah, look, it's funny. The West Indies performed in this series the way I think we thought they would in the Test series, and I think we're all hoping they were going to be slightly more competitive in the white ball stuff. Obviously, coming off, they were relatively successful against England at home, albeit I understand there was a different set of players available for that series. Look, you're right. Carty obviously is the one that stands out with a bat. Weirdly, he actually leads the series in runs, and I think that's obviously a sign of, Cam Green only batted twice, and Inglis was the other one that was up there. Roston Chase was an interesting choice. He actually batted okay in the end. It was a bit bizarre. Obviously, he was a stalwart in the Test team, and now he's kind of on the out of there, but he's back into the white ball setup. I think the problem is that there are excuses that are justifiable for the West Indies as to why they're not a successful Test team. I really do think that in the one-day setup, the talent is there. I do appreciate as well that a lot of these guys probably don't have a lot of limited overs experience in Australia, boundary sizes, pitch conditions, etc. And I think that really did, come to the fore. And the other part was they didn't really have guys taking wickets up front. I think their leading wicket taker of the series was Moti, the left-arm spinner, who bowled okay, but they weren't really able to get any penetration up the top with consistency, and that pretty much ruled them out of the game.
Yeah, the fact with their batting was they were continuously 3 wickets down in the power play. And when you're getting bowled out in 25 overs in a one-day international, and the opposition chases it down in 8 overs, it speaks, pretty big. But it's just more disappointing where they've got the likes of Nicholas Paran, who's playing in the IL T20 at the moment, Andre Russell, Sunil Narayan, who are playing for the Kolkata-based franchise in those tournaments around the world. They would just be so much better if they could find a way to, get these players to come into both their 50-over team and their T20 team. And from my understanding, Paran and Andre Russell will be available for that T20 series, which is really exciting. But yeah, the West Indies are not in a good spot in terms of their limited overs cricket. The fact that they missed out for qualification in the 2023 World Cup that's just gone, the fact that they missed out qualification in the T20 World Cup as well, which was in Australia in 2022, it's really disappointing. Just wanted to touch on someone who's been around the squad for a while, but really grown in this series, and that's Sean Abbott. What have you made of Sean Abbott's career so far? He's 30, about to turn 32. How much longer do you think he's going to be around this Australian setup?
I think Abbott's an interesting one from my perspective. I thought it was actually a surprise he was in this squad for as good as he's been. Again, this squad to me felt like a development squad from the Australian perspective. But at the same point in time, I think Abbott's best opportunity is going to be if they decide to start paling back the amount of one-day cricket and T20 cricket that Hazelwood, Stark, and Cummins play. He's a guy I think that they trust, which is a big part of it, particularly with so many young guys around the squad. And at the same point in time, if he can show more with the bat like he did in this series, then I certainly think that's going to elongate his career. You mentioned James Faulkner when it came to Will Sutherland. I think that's another guy that Abbott could try to replicate now at the back end of his career. For as long as he's able to bowl a reasonable speed and keep his Yorkers and slower balls relevant, I think there's a spot for him in international cricket. It's just going to be a matter of is he still in our best 15 come the Champions Trophy or the next World Cup, which would be quite a stretch, but I wouldn't say it's impossible by any stretch, especially if he's going to continue to develop his batting.
He's always been a player that's teased us for a long period of time. I'm pretty sure he's the leading wicket taker in Big Bash history. So, he's always proved that he can bowl well in the T20 format. Hasn't succeeded in the bigger tournaments such as IPL, but he's done really well when he's gone and played for Surrey in the county championships and the Blast over there. So I thought he bowled really well in this series. I think it was a good reward, considering he's been around the squad for, probably a 2-year period. And the fact that he was I suppose the next seamer in that World Cup squad. I think, it was great to see him take an opportunity, and things always haven't been easy for Sean Abbott, but I certainly think that he's got a lot of promise. I don't think he will play Test cricket. I think that boat's well and truly sailed. I know that was certainly on the agenda probably 3 or 4 years ago, but if he can continue what he's doing, and as you said, average 30 with the bat at number 8, I think that's a really good sign for Australia. But in terms of the long-term future for this ODI team, I thought in this series it was baffling that we didn't see Spencer Johnson. I thought it was bizarre to have Josh Inglis open the batting, even though Josh Inglis did really well. I thought it was very much a missed opportunity for Matt Short not to bat at the top of the order. We've seen the likes of Bartlett, Fraser-McGurk really impress in the couple of games that they've played. So, from this series, is there anyone that you think is going to realistically be there in the long term, particularly leading into that Champions Trophy in 2025?
The problem Australia's got is that they've got a lot of guys that are at their best in limited overs cricket. Batting in the top 3 against the new ball. It's not hard to figure out why. The field's up, the ball's hard. You kind of play your strokes, and we're in a generation of stroke players. I think that the mistake they're making, and I think they're trying to do this with Matt Short, but they're not really trying to develop these guys in the middle order as much as I'd like. And look, it's understandable to go in this series. There was going to be very few runs to be made in the middle order because we were dominating the game in most cases. But it's a problem when you keep encouraging these guys to go up, start their career as openers in one-day cricket. You've obviously they've done it with McGurk, and they're trying to do it with Inglis here, full well knowing that there's guys like Travis Head, guys like Mitch Marsh that want to come back in and open the batting. So I think it will bat right up the top there, and obviously Steve Smith likes to be relatively high up in one-day cricket as well. So that's probably my biggest concern around. Inglis can do it. It's just we're not really grooming guys to be batting through the middle order. Cam Green's another one that obviously likes to bat relatively early on in the innings. From younger guys to take away from this series going forward, I mean, Cam Green is an obvious one, and I'm not going to go through Hazelwood and the likes, Zampa, the guys that have been around for a while. I think that, generally from what I saw, Aaron Hardy's got a career in international cricket. Maybe I might even like him more as a test prospect. No doubt Fraser-McGurk. And then bowling-wise, look, it's hard to go past Bartlett. I'm not actually sure if Morris is going to be a one-day a consistent one-day player going forward. So for me, if I'm taking away some players from this, it was the improvement probably of Cam Green with a bit more responsibility, and then what we saw out of Fraser-McGurk and Xavier Bartlett.
Yeah, I'm certainly of the opinion that Travis Head will be one of the openers, and it's just a matter of who the selectors want to partner him. I certainly saw the benefits to Inglis batting at the top of the order, but I would be very interested to see how Inglis goes, let's say playing against in India where they're facing Shami and Bumrah opening the bowling. So that would be something to look for. Yeah, as you said, Xavier Bartlett, I think he will have a future in one-day cricket, but I still think he'll have to bide his time a little bit with the big 3 quicks still still playing as good as they are. So yeah, lots of positive signs for Australia in this series. And we look forward to the T20 series as well, which starts on Friday in Hobart, and we'll certainly be there for the game on Sunday night in Adelaide. So yeah, Louis, just want to say big thanks for coming on in the Cordon. It's great to have you on the show again.
Pleasure. Thanks, mate. Looking forward to the rest of this limited over series against the West Indies.
Yes, thanks so much for watching at home. Make sure that you follow In the Cordon on all of your social media pages, and we'll see you for our next episode where we review India and England. Cheers.